Hi, my name is Wojciech Hozga, and in this talk you will learn about our framework for hardening high-assurance security systems. Our work was motivated by German government regulations that require German e-health systems to meet strict security requirements. This work was done in a cooperation among IBM Research, Technical University of Dresden, Huawei Research, and Spontaneous. In short, we built an attestation framework which verifies that the computer is in the expected data center, it runs the expected operating system including software services executing in runtime, and that the high-assurance system processes are isolated from the operating system. These days, computing systems support our everyday life on virtually every level. However, not all of us realize that our life, prosperity, and geopolitical stability heavily depend on some of these systems called high-assurance security systems. A deviation from their correct behavior might threaten our life, prosperity, as well as political and social stability. It is of utmost importance to protect them using existing knowledge and technology. For example, a typical modern health system heavily relies on computing systems. It stores confidential patient health records in databases. Hospital automatization monitors patient state and controls live critical devices like respirators, while doctors have a real-time view of patients' basic life activities during the surgery. According to the IBM X-Force report, 5% of all observed attacks in 2021 targeted health systems. According to the same report, 8% of all observed attacks in 2021 targeted the energy sector. Consider consequences of a successful attack on nuclear power plants, gas pipelines, or oil supply chain. It could result in environmental contamination, danger to life, social disruption, or even economic paralysis. Similarly, attacks on critical infrastructure controlling water supply might lead to environmental contamination or shortages in drinking water. In 2021, 22% of all observed attacks targeted banks and financial institutions. Successful attacks can lead to bankruptcy of companies, civil disorder, or even a financial crisis. Unfortunately, high-assurance security systems are frequently targeted by attackers, and some of these attacks are successful, as it's testified by newspapers' headlines. In 2020, attackers extracted the personal data of hundreds of millions of Brazilian citizens from Brazilian electronic health systems. The same year, a supply chain attack on SolarWinds software led to the penetration of critical US governmental systems. For months, attackers had access to confidential governmental data, and to this day, we do not know the full scale of this attack. Last year, in 2021, a ransomware attack on a US oil pipeline led to oil shortages on the East Coast. We also know about attempts, so far unsuccessful, attacks on American and European power plants. Policymakers take this problem seriously. They define regulations that aim at making high-assurance security systems safer and more secure. Regulations define in which execution environments these systems can run, constrain who can access them, and define how to store and process the data. In theory, it sounds straightforward, but in practice it requires expert knowledge to build such systems. For example, German e-prescription regulations and the European GDPR regulations require that health records of German citizens are processed on computers located in Germany. Computers must be placed inside a server cage equipped with a surveillance system. Suppose a technician needs to get physical access to the computer to perform a maintenance job. In such a case, his actions would be monitored via the surveillance camera, which would get activated before the cage is electronically opened. The regulations also require dedicated defense mechanism at the operating system level. The e-prescription system can run only on a computer running the expected operating system. This might be achieved using standardized trusted computing mechanisms like TPM, enabling so-called attestation. The e-prescription system must also run in isolation from the operating system. This requires running its processes in so-called enclaves, hardware-isolated memory regions offered by trusted execution environment technologies available in modern processors. However, direct use of different security techniques does not necessarily increase security, so building a secure system accordingly to regulations is not straightforward. Existing security techniques differ in threat models and might not work for invariants. The problem we address is how to combine trusted computing techniques and trusted execution environments in a secure and verifiable way as it is required by German e-prescription regulations. Physical attacks compromise practically all software-level defense mechanisms. Examples of these attacks are cold boot attacks, DMA attacks, bus hijacking attacks, or fault injections like power glitches or using laser beam to introduce faults. For this reason, regulations force that computers are placed inside trusted data centers where defense-in-depth mechanisms limit physical access to the computer, making such physical attacks unlikely. But the problem is, how do we actually know that the computer on which we want to deploy the high-assurance security system, and to which we have only remote access, is really located in such data center? And even when we find a way to ensure that the computer is indeed in the correct data center, we still need to ensure that it runs the expected operating system. And this is again not straightforward because executables, dynamic libraries, and a configuration might be under adversaries' control. That means that the naive approach to asking the remote computer to identify itself does not work because the adversary can simply lie to us. So another problem we have to address is how to verify the integrity of the operating system running on a remote computer. In our approach, before we provision the remote computer with secrets or confidential data, like personal health records, we first establish trust with it. So we verify this computer is located in the correct data center and runs expected software. And to simplify this process, we delegate the verification tasks to an agent which runs on a remote computer that we want to verify. The agent is a piece of software protected from other software executing on the computer with a hardware isolation mechanism. We establish trust with the agent with the help of attestation protocol in which hardware cryptographically proves that the agent executes on genuine hardware. After establishing trust with the agent, we delegate to it the task of verifying that the computer is in the correct data center. For that, we introduce the concept of the trusted beacon, a dedicated, trusted computer that had been placed in a trusted data center and has been protected since then from being moved. The agent verifies that it is located inside the trusted data center by measuring the communication latency to the trusted beacon. It can distinguish between situations when it is located inside the data center and outside of the data center because the communication latency from the outside cannot be as low as from the inside of the data center due to additional network routing hops that increases latency above a certain threshold. The step is to let the agent verify the operating system load time and runtime integrity using well-established trusted computing techniques such as secure boot, measured boot, and trusted platform module (TPM). The agent uses the TPM and other trusted computing techniques to certify that the computer runs expected software. However, this scheme is vulnerable to the TPM cuckoo attack. The attacker uses a TPM from another computer to impersonate a legitimate operating system. The verifier cannot distinguish if the computer integrity is certified by the local or remote TPM. In our work, we build a protocol that detects the cuckoo attack. I will show now how our protocol works. The computer boot starts when the processor comes out of reset. The CPU then executes an immutable piece of code residing inside the chip. The boot software implements the secure boot technology to ensure that only digital designed software participates in the boot process. Eventually, the bootloader loads the Linux kernel, initramfs, and the operating system. In order to prove that the secure boot technology was enabled and the expected firmware booted the computer, we rely on a TPM. TPM is a discrete chip offering tamper-resistant storage, at least from the software point of view. The measurements can be stored there and cannot be removed until the next reboot, because the registers to which measurements are stored can only be extended with a new value rather than overread. These registers are called PCRs. During the boot process, each component calculates the cryptographic hash of the next component and stores the resulting hash in the TPM. The cryptographic hash is like a fingerprint uniquely identifying software. The agent will use these fingerprints later to verify what software bootstrapped the computer. Modern CPUs also support the measured boot of the operating system. In measured boot, fingerprints of kernel and initramfs are stored in dedicated registers of the TPM. These registers are called dynamic PCR. Our approach to detect the TPM cuckoo attack is to authenticate the TPM using a randomly generated secret changing with every boot. We can then catch the cuckoo attack because the remote TPM doesn't know the secret. To make this scheme sound, we need to ensure the secret is unpredictable and cannot be learned by the adversary. For that reason, the secret is generated inside the trusted execution environment and shared with the TPM in a measured, minimalistic execution environment established with the trusted boot. Later, the agent can detect the cuckoo attack because he can verify if he communicates with the local or remote TPM. To do so, the agent unseals the secret and requests the TPM to present the aggregated measurements of software executed during the boot process. Now, to ensure the agent communicated with the local TPM, the agent checks that the secret was generated securely, shared with the local TPM in a trusted environment, and that the TPM indeed knows the secret. We implemented this protocol on Intel CPU using Intel SGX, Intel TXT, and TPM technologies, because these technologies provide properties enlisted on the slide as P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5. Using these properties, the agent executing inside the operating system can verify that he indeed communicates with the local TPM present during the boot process. I encourage to read the formal proof in our paper for details. The agent can use then the TPM to certify not only the load time integrity measurement, but also the runtime integrity of the operating system. This functionality is provided by the Linux Integrity Measurement Architecture, IMA, which is a built-in security module of the mainline Linux kernel. IMA stores inside the TPM integrity measurements of all files, executables, and then dynamic libraries loaded by the kernel during the operating system runtime. Taking all together, our system supports verification that a high-assurance security system executes on a computer located in the trusted data center, or on multiple computers located in the trusted data center. Our system uses TPM to verify that load time integrity of the operating system is as expected. In other words, it verifies that the computer runs expected operating system. It uses Linux IMA to ensure the correct runtime integrity of the operating system, so that only expected trusted software executes on the operating system. It additionally relies on the trusted execution environment to run a high-assurance security system in isolation from the operating system. Finally, we simplified the attestation process by implementing a monitoring controller that communicates with agents on all provisioned computers and performs periodic checks to ensure the correctness of the deployment. Here are a few screenshots of the deployed system. The configuration, like certificates of deployed TPMs, whitelist of firmware and software measurements, can be defined manually and grouped into specific hardware generations or operating systems versions. The configuration can also be picked up automatically from the deployed computer following the trust on first use approach. When the computer boots for the first time, the agent running on this computer contacts the monitoring controller, which permits storing existing measurements of firmware and operating system as a trusted system profile. Every next computer with the same hardware generation or software automatically matches the defined configuration and can be added to the so-called pool of attested computing resources, which are used to execute high assurance, on which high assurance security systems are later executed. The system performs automatic recurrent verification of the load time and runtime integrity of remote computers. With our system, the verifier gets an automatic tool to monitor the integrity of the high assurance security system deployment. We evaluated our system with a set of micro and macro benchmarks. Now I will present results of two experiments: an end-to-end attestation latency of a real-world e-health application that we executed inside our system, and a comparison of our framework with state-of-the-art monitoring systems. We evaluated a real-world e-health machine learning application that identifies disease-specific pathways to help targeting host-directed treatments. We ran it natively without any additional security mechanisms. Then we executed inside an SGX enclave using SCON framework. And finally, we execute this application with our framework CHORS. Our framework provides additional security compared to other systems because it also verifies that the computer executes in the expected data center and the operating system load time and runtime integrity is as expected. The end-to-end latency of the application increased from 41 seconds to 53 seconds because of an overhead introduced with SGX and TPM and IMA attestation. The cuckoo attack detection does not influence runtime application latency because it's a one-time operation performed during the boot process. In other experiment, we performed the attestation latency comparison to other integrity attestation systems, such as Intel Cloud Integrity Technology CIT and IBM Attestation Client Server ACS. CHORS is 4 to 8 times faster in verifying remote operating systems integrity compared to other frameworks. As a conclusion, a combination of security defense techniques, as required by regulation, does not necessarily increase security because of incompatibility and different threat models. An expert knowledge is therefore required to meet such regulations and to make the system secure. We built CHORS, a framework that responds to regulations of German e-health systems. It attests to the operating system integrity and physical computer geolocation. It attests to the integrity of a process executing inside a trusted execution environment. And it also establishes trust with the local TPM from the inside of the trusted execution environment using our novel, formally proven protocol detecting the TPM cuckoo attack. Thank you. I'm happy now to answer your questions.